Welcome to the Table Tennis Chump To Champ Podcast. Follow our journey through the world of competitive table tennis as mediocre chump players hoping to one day become a champ. In this episode, we'll talk about our goals for the next year and our training plans to meet those goals. We'll cover drills, practice partners, coaching, technique improvements, and tactics. So, without further ado, I'm Mike, and welcome, Jeremiah.
Hey, Mike. Good to be here. So, talking about goals today, huh?
Yeah.
So, on the last podcast, you remember when we revealed our ratings?
Yes.
I have an amazing update,
Oh, because the
Yep.
ratings from the team's tournament have come out, right? So,
Yes.
yeah.
So
So
I
what's
went
your
from
rating
14.
now?
Dude, it's amazing. I honestly never thought I'd ever achieve this level of table tennis play, but I moved from 1400 to
Mhm.
1200.
Okay.
Amazing, dude. I think I'm getting better. So
Now,
I'm glad to see all this practice coming to the table.
now, do you think that your level actually went down, or do you think that maybe you were playing underrated
Oh,
players?
it's always hard to say, right? I think we were playing underrated players for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we mentioned we were playing Timothy Wong's students. So come on. You think
Yeah.
Timothy Wong is training up some like 1000, 1100 level players? Come on.
Yeah. So, in fact, I mentioned last time my rating was, I think, 915. It's now 950, 950 something.
Dude, we're getting closer. We're getting closer to each other.
Now, I do personally feel that I was probably underrated, and I think a lot of the players we were playing were underrated. So I think kind of everyone in the division kind of ended up underrated because the way the points work, I play Jeremiah. If I win, then I get like 40 or 50 points from Jeremiah, and Jeremiah loses 40 or 50. So it's kind of
Yeah.
zero sum, kind of. I mean, there's also adjustments, but
Well,
basically,
if we're underrated, then, we're able to just really say what we think we're rated. So I'm definitely rated like 2000. So just have some bad days. But
yeah.
I guess with that, we can talk about our training plans and training goals, right? You want to kick us off on that? You
Yeah,
you
so
go ahead.
so goals, right? Well, okay, how do you define your goal? Well, first, you may have a goal in terms of rating, like we were just talking about. So Jeremiah rated 1200 now. Do you have in your mind, like in a year, what rating do you want to be at?
That's always hard, right? Because I've done this game before where I think like, oh, at the end of the year, I want to at least be this rated,
Yeah,
and I don't move anywhere. So
yeah,
uh, I don't know if setting a rating goal is necessarily the best,
I agree. Yeah.
the best way to go about getting better at table
But
tennis
if you
because
just wanted to just throw a number out there, like what are you thinking? You were
uh,
1400, you're 1200 now. What number would like make you really happy if in
uh,
December 2022 you were at that rating?
if I could get to more tournaments, right? I think I would say a solid 1500. That would be new to
Okay.
me. That would be
Okay.
pretty new to me because I've been floating around, 1200, 1300, 1400. 1400 was the highest I ever achieved, but if I could get
Okay.
to 1500, I think that'd be like a breakout, that'd be new for me.
That seems like a relatively, reasonable, achievable goal.
But the difficulty is going to be getting to tournaments, right?
Yeah.
So I don't live in an area where there's a lot of table tennis action going on.
Yeah.
So for me to do tournaments, I got to drive pretty far.
Yep. So, okay, for me, and I was thinking about, well, points, right? So I'm currently like 950. And in the past, I always thought, oh, I want to gain like 200 points this
So,
year. And that was
you
always like my
know,
goal.
I want to push
But
the question back to you. What do you think you're actually rated? If you're underrated, then what do you think you are?
yeah, that's a good question. And so when I think about ratings, I actually feel this that, ratings change over time. And
Mhm.
I feel like from like 2018 when, we were, well, I am still kind of a beginner, but when we were really beginners, like 2017, 2018, I mean, I played not that many tournaments, but some tournaments. And I remember, and I have videos from some of those earlier tournaments of the level of play when I was playing like 1,000 rated players and 1,200 rated players. And I feel like overall ratings have deflated a little bit. So I feel like if I look at my current level in 2018 rating points, I honestly feel like I'm playing around 1,200. Okay.
Okay.
But in terms of the play that we saw in 2021, I feel like I'm more like in the range of 50 to 150 points underrated. So that would more put me around 1,000 to 1,100, max like 1,150 or so.
Do you think that just comes out because the players who are jumping into table tennis are just better, right? There's a lot of information on how to get better. So anybody who jumps in, there's a plethora of information.
I think like, new players, especially kids, they're coming in and they're coming into these like junior programs where they're getting a lot of coaching. So they're like improving rapidly, and that's kind of draining the ratings, right? And perhaps another thing is like with the pandemic, there weren't people were playing no tournaments for a while. You couldn't play any tournaments. And even in 2021, I think the amount of tournaments was lower and the amount people were playing tournaments was lower. But like you think like, especially these kids, I feel like they were practicing a lot, right? So it's like their rating went up or their ability went up a lot, but their rating did not. So that also drains the rating pool.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That's my thoughts.
So that's your thought on what you think you're, truly rated. So getting back to goals, how do you think you'll get there? How do you get what? Well, the next question being, of course, is what rating are you trying to achieve and how you'll get there, right?
So I would say like, if I was to throw a number out, I'd say like 1,200. But here's the thing when I think about that, right? Like if I believe I'm currently like 1,150, 1,200 isn't that much higher. And the other thing is I found like I could just get lucky at a tournament and beat some like overrated player and get some big adjustment and then get to like 1,250. Like that's totally feasible. That could totally happen. But I wouldn't be that satisfied. Yeah, I wouldn't be that satisfied if my level was only as I am, right? But on the other hand, if I know my level improved a lot, like improved like in my mind, like 200 points, I would feel satisfied. Even if I did some tournaments, played a bunch of underrated kids and still ended up at like 1,000. I would be kind of disappointed with the rating. I mean, I can't deny that, but I would still be pretty satisfied inside. So I think numbers wise, I would throw out like 1,200 or throw out like gaining 200 points. But I think in actuality, I think just I want to have improvement of like kind of like one level of play, which I define as like 200 points. What do you think about that, Jeremiah? Is your thought similar in terms of what your goal is?
I think that's probably a fair assessment, right? It seems feasible to increase by 100 to 200 points, but it's a mountain to climb, right? Because at our level, there's just so many things to learn, and one thing could really increase our game by 100 to 200 points. It's just the problem of trying to get that one thing that is really holding us behind because there's so many things to work on.
You could have one weakness, and if you improve that weakness, that raises your game. And I think for me, I've fallen in the past in a trap where I feel like I just need to improve one thing 200 points, and then I'll gain 200 points. But the rest of my game is still 200 points behind. So it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah. But the hard question, how do you achieve it?
Yeah.
What do you do?
So I guess the first thing in terms of before we talk about our plans to get there, because this kind of influences your plan, right? And I'll define it as what's your training situation. So that's like, do you have access to a table at home, a robot, practice partners? What level are those practice partners? What clubs do you have nearby? How much time do you have to train per week? That's a big one for me. But to start, Jeremiah, like what's your training situation?
Not good. And I feel, if I had to imagine that this is probably a pretty common situation across the United States, where we're at. So for me, I luckily have a lot of time that I could
Okay.
dedicate to training, right? I
Okay.
don't have other responsibilities other than my job. So
How many hours a week do you think you can? Well, I guess the other things may be limiting the amount of time just because there's not enough. But if you had no other limiting factors, how much time could you devote to table tennis per week?
You mean like outside of my job?
I
Because my job is literally my my only responsibility.
Okay.
I,
Well, then you need to sleep and eat, I guess.
yeah. So
So
I guess I could probably comfortably commit like 4 hours a day, and
4 hours a day.
on the weekends I could totally do longer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
mean, I
you're
like to
saying
play.
you could easily do like 20, 30 hours a week would be like,
I could.
yeah.
I
Okay.
could.
But okay, what other limiting factors do you have?
The limiting factors being I don't have clubs that are open 20 to 30 hours.
Okay.
So the clubs by me, they're just
Mhm.
simply they're more like meetups, right? Where they have
Mhm.
they kind of worked out a deal with a community center, and a bunch of people just show up on a specific day for maybe
Okay.
3 hours, and
Okay.
then they play. So
So how many
like
hours a week are these clubs open?
let's see, we got Sunday. That's probably going to be open for like 4 hours, and I stay for that whole session. And then there's going to be Wednesday. That's also another like 4 hours. So
Okay.
I can stay for that whole session. So that's like 8 hours a week.
Okay.
My Sunday session, I do 1 hour of coaching personally, but
Okay.
sometimes I worry that's not enough.
So you can do coaching in this club. Like there's a table that you and your coach can stay an hour on, and the club
Yeah, but
has that.
and I want to make clear he's not like some world class club, right? Who just like
Okay.
who was in the Olympics, won the US nationals. He's just like a 1800 player himself, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that he's better than me is all I need. I just need him to hit balls in my direction.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that I think that is really one of the biggest limiting factors, is just being able to actually get out and play at a club, right? Because I only described 8 hours that I could actually play. But then the next
Okay.
question is, I get to the club, who are the players that I can play with?
Hmm.
And it's a lot of people who are more casual, which
Okay.
totally fine, but that hurts
Interesting.
one's ability to
Okay. So
to
what's like the average
excel.
rating of the players at this club? What's the
Uh,
range?
it's really hard to say because they're all
Mhm.
unrated, right?
Okay.
But I can beat a majority of them. I think there's maybe like two players there that I
Hmm.
just cannot beat. It's really
Okay.
difficult for me, especially the guy who does short pips on the forehand and long pips on the backhand.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I mixed that. Long pips on the forehand, he attacks. He does
Oh,
loops with
that's interesting.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Okay. So you're
But
saying you're better than like maybe 80% of the clubs.
yeah, exactly. But
Okay.
those like 2 to 3 people I think are pretty good in terms of being able to up my game. The problem is
Okay.
doing training. They
Okay.
It's all about doing just the games and matches, right? Do you have this problem? What's your training situation like over there? Do you have clubs by you?
So it's a very much similar situation. I have one club in my area. It's about 30 minutes away. And it is like 2 times a week. I think it's less than 4 hours. I feel like about 3 hours per day.
Mm,
So, and that's the only like real club. There are some other community centers where people do play, but it's not really like a club, but there is kind of some organized time. And so that provides some time on other days per week. But in reality, in terms of my situation, I don't even have time to go to the club two times a week.
yeah,
So in reality, my goal is probably to go to the club like just one time a week. So that'd be like 2 to 3 hours in the club. And the other thing, okay, in terms of the level of players in the club, it's anywhere from like complete noobs. There's some but probably the average player is probably better than me. So a lot of the players are like competitive players. There aren't really high level. I'd say the top players are like around 2000, but there's several like 2000 level players. There's like,
do you actually get to play with those players, or are they out practicing with the other 2000
that's
level
another
players?
good question, which I'm wondering for you. But in terms of for me at this club, they have a system where you get in a queue, but you aren't in a queue for a particular table. So there's not like one table that's the advanced table, one that's intermediate, one that's beginner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, two players play a match, and then the winner stays and the loser gets off, and then the next player up in the queue just goes. So it's random. It's random who you get to play. So in that sense, you get to play a variety of different levels of players. So that is an advantage for me. I can play a lot of players that are better than me, but it kind of depends, and it's based on luck. And there's times when I go and spend 3 hours and I don't really get any good matches in. I might get like a few matches with complete noobs, which doesn't really help me that much. And then maybe I get one match, but that's with like a 2000 player, which I don't actually benefit that much because the skill level is just so different.
You just get destroyed.
And really where I'd benefit is playing someone from like anywhere from like 1000 to like 1400 would be like a really good match for me. But you know, I miss out on those players, so that can happen.
You know, but what about actual practice, right? You're describing playing matches, which is good, but you still got to do the drills.
So
are you able to get that?
So that's the other thing. In the club, basically there's 5 tables, but there's more people that show up. More than 10 people show up. So there's a lot of waiting around time, and there's no time to like just practice. The club, it's basically like practice matches. You have to go up and you only have like 15 minutes to play a practice match, and then you get off. There's not time to just spend with one practice hour partner for an hour. So how about in your club? Is like how much of that 3 or 4 hours of time are you actually able to play? Are you able to play with one person for a long time? Like play with that player that's better than you for a long time?
So it depends, right? So the Sunday club that I go to, it's the same situation that you've described, where there's more people than tables, and also just people really want to play games. They don't want to sit and do drills, which is why I do the 1 hour of coaching, because I see it as that 1 hour of coaching is my time to do drills. And
but is there just a separate table set aside for coaching? I'm just curious how that.
Okay. Yes, correct. Yep. So they just have that. I think they have 1 or 2 tables set aside for coaches that they have, but you know, they only have maybe 2 coaching sessions. So after those sessions, the tables are open for play. Well, yeah, everybody just wants to play matches, and that's fine. But I think you got to do drills and practice. The Wednesday club. So the Wednesday club that I go to, it's beneficial for me, I think, but not beneficial for the players there, because me and 3 other players show up regularly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those 3 other players that show up are better than me. So I show up and, you know, I play with them. And since there's so few players, they're more willing to do drills. Like they'll just sit and do drills back and forth. So that's really nice for Wednesdays.
That's cool. So you get like a lot of practice and quality time on you can just be on the table most of the time.
Yes, exactly. That too.
Okay, cool.
Yep. But you know, some Wednesdays that they'll get a bit busier. Like they'll get more casual players that come in, and you know, we can't do drills because we have to rotate off the tables to make it fair and let everybody get a chance to play. So, but a good chunk of time on Wednesdays we can actually dedicate to practice.
Okay, so that at least sounds pretty decent. So you have some time like on Sundays to play practice matches, although the competition level varies and sometimes you aren't quite getting the level you want. But then you also have, sounds like a decent few hour chunk of time where you can do a little bit more like practice style. And it sounds like with some pretty good practice partners, you're saying a little bit higher level than you.
Yeah. You know, they'll even mess with me, right? Like they'll just they'll just lob back because they feel sorry for me.
and then you said you had the 1 hour of coaching. So I think that's like some important pieces to put together, right? Coaching, matches, match play, and practice. So you've kind of got that, but probably not as much time because of just like the facilities are limiting for you.
Yeah, I feel like I can improve with this setup, right? It's 2 days a week, maybe in total 8 hours in the week. I wish I could do more time, but the real problem has been trying to transition what I do in coaching into my matches, because in the coaching, he'll tell me like, oh, you're doing these things wrong, do this instead, and then we'll correct it. But just in that 1 hour, you can only do so much. And then if I go do a practice match, I will throw it away, right? Like it's difficult to bring what you learn that you're doing as mistakes to the match,
Yeah.
right?
Now, do you feel like that means you just need more of the match play to apply what you learned in that coaching?
If anything,
or...
I feel like the opposite. I feel like I would need more coaching, but oh boy, coaching's expensive. Especially more than just the coaching costs, but I have to drive an hour to get to these clubs. So that's another limiting factor. Just in having to go to these clubs, that's 2 hours of my day gone, an hour there and an hour back.
Yeah.
Right.
But of course, time's not your limiting factor. So
yeah. So that's the drive. It can be so boring, if only there was a podcast for me to listen to. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's see. So for me, I described the club. So the club is really no opportunity for coaching or practice. But I do have, in terms of players I met from the club, one fortunate thing in the past year, I think I have kind of 2 practice partners that I can play with sometimes on a semi-regular basis. And that's, as long as they're willing to keep playing with me. But at this point, it feels pretty good. And basically, with these players, there's a table we can use at another facility. And then we get exclusive table time. So one guy, we kind of play at his outdoor table, which is another thing. The environment isn't 100% ideal being outdoor. The ground's not perfectly flat. The table bounce is decent, but a little bit different. But I still feel like overall that's beneficial. And another guy, he has access to like some other racket club, and it's not really open to the public for table tennis, but they have some table, and guess he's like a tennis coach there, and we're able to go there and do some practice. I think they're both pretty good practice partners for me. They're willing to just kind of do combination. Well, I do a little bit different things with each of them, but overall it's more practice, more drills focused, whether just open hitting and not as much just playing matches, although sometimes we do that as well. And in terms of their level, I think they could both like probably beat me, but by a little bit. So it's not like a too big of a gap. And they both seem still willing to play with me. So that's pretty good. Now, in terms of coaching, there's not really any like commercial coaches. And there's some higher level players. And, for like 2 years ago, I was paying this guy like, $25 an hour. He was like, like a 1800 level player or something. And
so
he would coach.
So like similar situation to what I have, right?
Yeah, except we couldn't actually do it at the club, but he had another friend and we were playing in that guy's basement, and he was doing this with some of the other players too. But in fact, that guy moved somewhere else, so he's not available anymore. I don't even know if there's anyone else in the area that's willing to do coaching for like a kind of a nominal fee like that. But there's no like professional coaches or anything where I live now. If I wanted to do that, I'd have to drive like 2 hours.
Yeah. I mean, what about those 2,000 players at your club? Just say, hey, come on, you think those 2,000 players don't have a table at their house?
I haven't explored that possibility, but the other thing, remember, is my limiting factor is my time. Now I could use some of that time for coaching, but if I did that, that would eat into what I have already planned for other things, right? So basically, I think I've basically gone over the main activities I have. So I have going to the club, which I'm hoping to do like up to once a week. And then I have these 2 practice partners. So I feel like if I can do 1 session per week with a practice partner, that's another, like 1 to 2 hour session. But actually in reality, I feel like being able to do the club and the practice partner session in the same week, some weeks will not even be possible. But I think like 1 to 2 sessions per week. Some weeks I might be able to do both. Some weeks I may only be able to do one of these, like do the session with a practice partner and skip the club. So then if I'm going to work another coaching session into that, I need to cut away from my match time at the club or cut away from my practice partner time. So,
but do you think that could potentially be more valuable, right, than match time, right? An hour with a coach, keep in mind, an hour with a coach is 100% selfish. You never have to cede time to your partner.
I think it could be, so maybe that's something that I can look into later this year. But like I said, I don't know if there's actually players willing to coach me, even if I paid them money. So that's another thing. So that is another thing. Okay, there is the 1/3 thing that I have. So I think, Jeremiah, you don't have this, but that is I do have a table at my home in my shed in the backyard.
Yeah.
Now, I usually don't invite players to come play here because basically my shed is too small to actually play a match on. But what I have is I have the table pushed up into the corner, and then I have a robot on it. So the robot, that spits balls.
Yeah, and I think that's great for obviously practicing technique and making sure you're doing proper technique. And then you can make it switch corners and things like that, right? So you can do footwork drills.
Yeah, so the robot I have is like programmable, so I can program like a sequence of balls, and it can vary between the speed, the spin, and the placement.
You have a plan for how many hours you want to dedicate on that?
So yeah, so I think this is a big tool for me because I'm basically saying, like, away from the house, I basically have, I don't know, somewhere from just like, I'm going to say like 2 to 4 hours a week that I can spend 1 to 2 sessions, 2 to 4 hours total. But I think because my table is just right there at home, I don't have like the travel time to go there. I can just kind of do it when I have small amounts of time. And I feel like this is one goal or one change that I'm going to try to do. In the past, I would go do a session in the back on the robot, and it would be like a 1-hour session. And the 1-hour session, I'd get all sweaty, I'd change, do an hour, I'd get all sweaty, then I have to shower afterwards. So basically I need like a 90-minute block of time. But basically with my time, I have a little one at home. The 90-minute chunk of time is hard to find, but like 15-minute chunks of time are easy to find. So basically, instead of only doing that 90-minute session like once a week, instead, I'd like to break that up into multiple smaller sessions at a time. So that's what I've been doing, trying to do this past few weeks, which has been working well. So, I have my work.
Good idea.
I work from home. Like, I can find a 15-minute break during the day when my daughter's in daycare, and just go to the back and just hit for 15 minutes. So just a few drills, and then come back, and from that I'm not too sweaty, I don't need to shower or anything, I can go right back and get into a meeting and it's still fine.
Do you usually if anything, it's probably a good way to wake you up and regenerate, right? So in that 15-minute block of time, do you just do one technique? Do you just focus on one thing, like better forehands, better footwork, or are you trying to mix things up? Like, I'll work on my push for 2 minutes, I'll work on my forehand for 2 minutes, my backhand for 2 minutes.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. And I think part of, when I'm thinking about my training plan for the next year, so in the past year, I think what I've tried to do is just jam as much stuff into that, whether I'm doing 30 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever, jam as much stuff in there as I can. So it's like, all right, I need to work on my forehand, I need to work on my backhand, I need to work on my transition, my blocking, my pushing. And it's just like a few minutes of this, then switch to this, and a lot of like advanced drills. And part of this was I was really crammed, in the beginning of 2021, I basically didn't do a lot of training at all. Then this tournament was coming up, and I had 3 months.
To rush.
Yep. I needed to develop everything, right? So I a bit feel like I was forced into doing that, but also I don't know if really that was the best idea either. But
yeah, that's why I cheated and got the coach, because after the pandemic and not playing for a while, I was worried like, I'm going to go into this tournament really severely just underdeveloped. So I ended up getting the coach, but I stuck with him. He's pretty good. So I guess with that, have we even talked about how we're going to get to where we want to get to? We talked about what we have
Yeah,
available to us, right? And we talked
yeah.
about things that are limiting us, but
So
have we
let's
really
talk
talked
about,
about?
Jeremiah, the
Yes.
specifics of what you want to do. Like what do you want to focus on? Any particular drills or any particular,
God.
aspects of your game, like forehand, backhand? I mean, what more specifics to
So
your plan to get better?
so this is always the hard part, right? So I've really been just trying to focus on drills and practice where I can. And in the practice matches, I don't know, they don't feel as valuable to me because I feel like in my practice matches, I'm not necessarily applying what I learn in my coaching to correct. So I almost feel like my practice matches are actually hurting me
Uh-huh.
because it's not allowing me to forget bad habits
Yeah.
and, you know, develop good habits.
What
So
about the practice time that you have with your practice partners? Do you think that that's better than the practice matches?
I would say, yeah, I would say that's better because
Mhm.
that's just a solid chunk of time where we're just doing like one particular drill, just going back and forth, doing whatever it might be, forehands, backhands, footwork,
Yeah.
blocking too. That's I think blocking is a very invaluable skill
Yeah.
that everyone should have, but it's hard to develop. But one thing I will say that I've been trying to focus on more that I think is has helped in its own way is actually physical fitness. So
Okay.
that's what everybody always thinks about what they can do on the table, but I've been trying to think of things like since I don't have a lot of clubs available to me, what can I do off the table? So
Okay.
I've been trying to think about physical fitness, which I can probably do like a whole podcast on, and then
So, well, how about in short? What are some things, some exercises do you have any identified that you can do throughout the year
oh
to
god,
improve your physical fitness related to table tennis?
I'm telling you, it's everything. So when I started, so this is how it all began. When I was doing the coaching sessions, right? That is sitting there and doing one stroke for, 10, 15 minutes at a time.
Hmm.
And since I'm really tall, I have to squat down pretty low. And what kind of ended up happening was I could only do a particular drill for like a minute, 2 minutes before my legs just gave out and they got tired. I had to take like a 30-second to a minute break to let my legs rest. So, you know, uh, legs, right? Watch professional players. Just look at
Okay.
how huge their
Yeah.
freaking legs are. That they're
And
ginormous.
so you want to develop stronger legs. Is that doing squats, doing lunges, anything in particular?
Yeah, yes, yes. Squats in particular, but
Okay.
all of the above, really. Squats, lunges. There are more explosive
Okay.
exercises you can do. Like I forget what they're called, but I'll have to look it up.
And are you
Um,
planning to go to a gym to do these or just do
oh
them at
yeah,
home with weights?
I'm going to a gym, but I could imagine you could
Okay.
honestly do this at home if you got like a set of dumbbells or something like that. But
Okay.
it's also more than just legs too, right? Like, want to know another problem I had in terms of physical fitness? My
Okay.
backhand is my weak side. So I would
Yeah.
do backhands and my shoulders would get tired. So
Interesting.
I started doing shoulder exercises. You have to twist when you do a stroke. So that's core exercises. So physical fitness for me, I think, is just a piece that I want to focus on more
Okay.
outside of just the table itself. What about yourself? Do you have any particular goals that you're focusing towards?
Well, honestly, in terms of physical fitness, with my limited time, like in my plan,
Hard.
I had devoted like zero time to off the
Yeah.
table. Not that I don't think that would help me, but I
To
just
be
think
honest,
the on the table with my limited time is going to benefit me more. And even
yeah.
though I feel like, yeah, probably, my legs after a few matches are getting, tired, I don't feel like it's to the point that that's what's holding me back. I'd rather develop my technique better. So I think that's the key thing for me is when I look at if I'm going to come up with a year plan, I feel like the first few months of the year, I really need to focus on technique, improving my technique. So in particular, I mentioned kind of in the last podcast, my forehand inconsistency was a big thing. So I think that's what I'm going to be working a lot in these first few months, on both my robot and on my time with the practice partners.
And then that's when you forget how to do a backhand.
That is true too. But
Yeah, that's the problem I've been facing. I've been working on my backhand, my forehand falls apart. So
yeah.
but continue.
So I think some things that I've found in terms of specific things, and I've been trying these out for the past few weeks, but kind of based on what I observed in the tournament playing matches for the first time in a few years, was, some things that kind of mistakes I made practicing on the robot. So I found, I basically, over the pandemic time, I attempted to develop more of a forehand topspin instead of a forehand flat hit that I had before. And on the robot, I could do that decently. But what I found is like, I would start training on the robot for my 60-minute session. And for the first 5-10 minutes, my forehand was just all over the place, right? But then after like hundreds of balls, I got it dialed in.
Zero it in.
Right.
Yeah.
But then in the match, you just don't have that opportunity. Even in the morning when we warmed up, the amount of time of us hitting it back and forth was not as much time as I'd have on the robot. But even if in that time I got my forehand dialed in, then I'm sitting for 30 minutes to an hour before my actual match. And then at the start of the match, I only have a few balls. And I think out of the 12 matches I played, I think maybe 1 or 2, I had a somewhat dialed in forehand. And then the other 10 were just like really, I couldn't hit 3 forehands in a row during the, during the warm up. So it was really bad. So for that, I feel like when I'm doing my robot time, I need to focus on, and I think that's why more 15-minute sessions will help, because that'll force me to get that forehand dialed in sooner.
Oh, that's a good thought.
Yeah. So I'll just start, and in the beginning, these first few months, really basic stuff. So just like refining the technique, getting the technique down. I'm not going to go to what I was doing a month ago before the tournament, where I was doing like random position and lots of weird position stuff. But really, I mean, just a basic forehand, just to do like hit 20 balls, right? Then stop. And then here's one thing that I'm going to try to do that I think is helpful. Do 20 balls, which is a topspin to topspin. Then switch it to doing 20 backspins where I'm lifting.
Oh, because it forces your brain to separate the two strokes.
Then switch it back to 20 topspins, then 20 backspins, and maybe repeat that 2 or 3 times, and then that's my 15 minutes. So
are you also recording these sessions too? Like
I'm recording them sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that would also be really important when doing these sessions, just to make sure that you're not falling into bad habits, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that I've definitely done before. I have recorded myself on the robot before, and I do, when I look back, find that there's definitely times where really my technique regressed because I was focusing on other things. Yeah, so that's like a few of the specifics that I had. Let's see, one area we didn't discuss is like tournaments. I mean, what's in our practice plan in terms of doing tournaments? I think, Jeremiah, you were saying that getting out to more tournaments more frequently, you think is going to help.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's going to help, but I see the tournaments as a test. That's my test.
Okay.
So it's one thing to do all of this practice, but you need to be able to measure to whether or not you're improving, and also just to see the parts where, when you're competing, where are people taking advantage most. Like, practice matches are fine also for this, but in a tournament, I think it's I don't know, it's different. It feels different to me than a practice match. So it's kind of difficult to find tournaments around me. They come up and exist. I just have to keep my eyes open. I might have to drive a bit far. What about you? Do you have tournaments by you, or?
So I don't have many tournaments by me in terms of within an hour, but in terms of tournaments for me, I think I view it a little bit different, because in the past year or the past 2 years, I didn't play any tournaments. And I found that, going to this team tournament, the ability to like develop the tactics is really, I feel like I need some more tournament play to do that. And I had lots of practice match play, but in these practice matches, like going to the club and just playing the practice matches, there's no rating points on the line. So both how I approach it and both how my opponent approaches it is different. I'm more approaching it as I'm going to focus on this thing. And it's like, it's more in between like actual tournament match where you're really trying to win. In a practice match, I'm kind of trying to win, but I'm also kind of just trying to get good practice and improve myself, and I think your opponent also views it the same way. So, like in the deuce play, like, and it really mattering, that's the area where I think more tournaments is going to help me. So I feel like I'm going to try to, the past year, I didn't play any tournaments, and then I did this 3-day tournament. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the teams next year, but I think instead, to start with, if I can do like 3 regular 1-day tournaments throughout the year, one in the spring, one in the summer, one in the fall, and then maybe if I have the time and I can make it happen, maybe doing the teams again. But 2 or 3 at least spread out throughout the year. So getting this training with the robot, for the next few months, and then just testing myself out in a tournament. I think that's really going to help me.
Well, we covered a lot of material today, right? Let's see. We covered all of our goals. I know that, as to what rating we hope to get to, what rating we think we're at. We covered limiting factors and things that we have available to us so that we can actually try and reach our goals. And our plan to utilize what we have available to us to get to our goals, and hopefully get to more tournaments.
Yeah, the time just really flew by.
Yeah, it always does.
Well, I'm excited. I'm pumped. I'm pumped for this next year and going out, implementing my training plan and seeing where we're at. And
at this point, with all the time that we've played and all the time we've practiced already, I'm just looking forward to have some fun, because at the end of the day, I don't want to crush my spirits if I don't make it to 1500, right?
Well, we'll keep updating you guys on the podcast, on our progress over the next year, or hopefully we will.
Yeah, yeah, right. But just keep in mind, we're just chumps. We're just chumps. So,
well, after this year, hopefully we're one step towards being a champ. So,
yeah, what's in between? Are you just a chump until you're a champ?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Define champ. Is it only when you're in the nationals?
All right. With that, I guess we should wrap it up. So I'm Mike.
Yep. And I'm co-host Jeremiah.
And this has been the Chump to Champ podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.